Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Theory of Racelessness YouTube channel. If you'd like to see more, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to get notified every time we post a new video. To get even more involved, feel free to leave us a comment down below and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. Now, enjoy the video.
And so I think that like the idea that the impact that race will have on you is sort of the same thing, only instead of perhaps being a positive influence like a religious belief can be, racial identity can be paralyzing, right? So you can see that yes, sports do, I think the biggest, yes, like I said, there's differences in height in people, so I don't want to pretend that like all groups would all be the same, even if, I mean, obviously there's going to be cultural differences, but of course, like there are different groups that are going to have different average height and like different abilities. But what I think the sports disparity shows us is just how harmful race is for people. Like once you racialize a trait, you make it almost impossible to achieve for different people. And I mean, you can make it, and so I do think that the disparity is really striking. I just don't think it's showing what they think it shows.
Thank you so much, Tade, for explaining that. Yeah, it definitely helped crystallize in my mind because, I was taking pretty diligent notes throughout. And the thing that I kept writing down was the sort of Steelmanning that you were doing for people who would contend that this particular thing is evidence of race. I kept writing down that it's still not racial, right? Even the misconception or the sort of myth that comes behind West Africans being able to being the best sprinters, it still struck me that that's still not racial because, if you're racializing everyone who comes from the continent of Africa within a certain time period, since all of humanity came from Africa, but within more recent centuries, if you racialize the people who come from Africa as Black, for something to be racial, it would strike me that it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be able to pinpoint it to a particular place, right?
True.
Like that to me is
a lot of the new races are now willing to cut Africa in half, which I don't think is a I mean, yeah, I agree that alone should get you to abandon race the way that we do it. But some of them like weirdly like, okay, I'm still going to racialize people. I'm still going to call people Black and white. But actually, there's two Blacks. There's East Africa, there's West Africa. Those are now two races, Black A, Black B, right? And they're pretty comfortable in doing that. And so I like to make the point that no, that doesn't make any sense either, because the top 100-meter runner in Africa is from Kenya, right? So like the data doesn't say that either. But you're right. That would be a good reason to give up on race, but people seem to not do that. They seem to say, okay, fine. There's East and West, two different races. Even though I'm gonna call you Black if you're from either one. But I'm going to say, like, for this talk of sprinting and running, those are two races. And they just easily do that, which is, I think, they kind of missed the point there.
But based off of what you're saying, and because I'm just articulating my thoughts to make sure that you can correct me if I've misinterpreted or misheard of or misconceived of anything of what you said. But part of what I was thinking too is, even if people then say, okay, well, West African and East African are two different races, that still falls apart to me because of the thing called the diaspora, right? Because if for something to be racial in the ways that a lot of people try to make things racial by racializing certain information and outcomes and disparities and things like that, to my mind, for something to be racial, to actually fit into whatever boxes we create for anything, it would have to be measurably true, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. Measurably true across the board. And like you were saying, I think one of the strongest points of what you were talking about was the disparity between the US and virtually every other place, but also a lot of the places in the Caribbean, and then the disparity between Jamaica and like virtually everywhere else.
Exactly.
Because even that, like we could say, okay, well, Jamaicans are a race too, but But you and I both know in the context of America, people would still say, but it's still racial because Jamaicans are Black because, you know, they're descended from Africa.
I know from the Caribbeans that run that believe Jamaicans are a separate race, that those are the rowdy slaves. And like, there's a special, like the Jamaicans are different.
Yeah. And
behave so badly. I mean, this isn't an American, like Black, white racialization, but people do this. And they're serious, right? It sounds crazy, like in the context of the U.S., because the U.S. is Black and white. But no, people think, they're Jamaican. You know, like
But the thing that resonates with me in that like area of discourse about all of this is the fact that I'm consistently talking with people about, you know, asking the question of does capital R racism travel? Because right now there is this narrative that the thing that people call white supremacy is everywhere, anti-Blackness is everywhere. You know, it's global, it's omnipresent, you know, and thereby whoever you are, wherever you are, if you go to a place where there are mostly racialized white people, then you will experience a thing. And if you go to a place where there are predominantly racialized Black people, white supremacy is still there because the Europeans were there and all this other stuff that comes along with that way of thinking. But one thing that I've been exploring and uncovering with my students, for example, is the fact that we could go to any country at any time period and we could find racialization happening. We could find different races, in other words. And racialization is always bad because, like you were saying really eloquently, there's virtually nothing positive about being racialized if you understand what racialization is and how it operates in these different places. In America, we have the Black-white dichotomy, but in other places, it's what people in America would conceive to be the sort of white versus white or the Black versus Black. But really, it's like different ethnic tribes, you know, warring and things like that within the same country. And that we could say then that racism exists everywhere because racialization happens everywhere. One thing I'm talking about in my second book is I think the necessary distinction between racialization, like for example, for Americans to think of Jamaicans as a different race, I think would be obviously equally pernicious. But there's a difference between racialization and ethnicization. But the difference comes down to how the biases and oppression and prejudice operate in different contexts. And so it looks differently everywhere. And it's always fascinating to me to hear about this kind of pushback that you might receive, and obviously that I receive just as much too, especially as it pertains to the evidence that people would uphold and say, this is proof positive that race is biological, Tade. But then when you try to walk down the path, they make all kinds of justifications and concessions and constant. You know, it's the same for you. The evidence that people use as the biological fact of race is what color blindness, what those folks are to the theory of racistness. It's like some people, they don't want to know and they don't want to disbelieve. They want to feel comfortable in their worldview because it serves them in whatever capacity. But the strength of your argument and what I'm really happy to have a better understanding of, I think, boils down to a couple of things, which is namely, for something to be racial, it strikes me that we should not be able to like pinpoint it to a certain place. If you know, whether we pinpointed to Jamaica or whether we pinpointed to Kenya or whether we pinpointed just to West Africa, more broadly speaking, or East Africa, as some people want to say distance runners derive from, but you say is not factually true.
It's wherever not factually true. It's not factually true that sprinters don't derive from Kenya.
Right.
Kenya's history in marathoning and long distance is pretty incredible. They're also good at sprinting. So I mean, they're not the only. So North Africa has a history of being like, it's weird that North Africa has a history of like the middle distance, like not the really long, not the really short, for some reason, right? And then East Africa has this big history of very, very long running, like the marathon. But it's also the marathon. It sucks. I mean, who wants to run the marathon, right? So it's like, if there's a culture that adopts it, right? Then I mean, I said there's one famous Jamaican marathon, right? And he's a Jamaican, and he's fine. I mean, he was like a world-class marathoner. But I mean, everyone was like, "What are you doing, man? We don't do that." And it's like that nobody wants to run 26 miles with you, right? So it's like, it's a hard thing to do on your own. Who wants to be a marathoner, right? So Kenya already has a tradition of being a marathoner, right? So they already do that. So they and that's one of those things where it's not fun. So like, it's gonna be hard to get that up and going if you're in a country where people don't do that. Like, how do you convince them to be first, you know? So no, I mean, there's fast runners all over Africa, in every country, different distances. I mean, but you know, there's fast runners that like all over the world, you know, like there really are. And it's a strange thing to but yeah, you can see that race has its biggest effect in how people think of themselves. I mean, that is the biggest thing it does, because most people aren't going to be the best, right? Like, no matter what your race is, you're not going to be the best.
Period.
And it's just, yeah, right. I mean, that's just the numbers say that genetically you probably are fated not to be the best. That's just how it is, right? So it's just, you know, anything to make that brutal fact even worse is only going to take that away from you. But you can see, like, when you go to Jamaica, like that they run, you know, like you go there and like the amount of running that they do is incredible. And also the amount of cultural capital that they put towards sprinting is incredible, right? So like, for them, they don't have the Super Bowl, but they have like the high school track championships. And it's
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to support our channel and keep the conversation going. For more Theory of Racelessness, you can follow us on Twitter @Racelessness or use the link in the description box down below. We hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, there is still so much more to come. Until then, thank you so much from the Theory of Racelessness. Have a great day.